ladies and gentlemen, episode number 118 of Let's Go Racing with David Starr. Tyler Jones here with you. So glad to have you with us. Myself and David, a shorter show today with the holiday weekend as we look back at the weekend that was an exciting race at the Chicago Street Course. We will recap it all and it gets David's thoughts and analysis on the race. Also look ahead to this weekend at Atlanta as well. And plenty to talk about. We'll get to our news and notes later. Also, our Ask David segment coming up at the end of the show. David Starr joining us as we're in the same place. David, enjoying the 4th of July. Great weekend. Great to celebrate America here.
Man, it's an awesome day. I hope everybody had a great time. I know me and Tyler did. And, man, Tyler, I'm kind of concerned. Where's Dominic? You know, I think Dominic and his family they've had a good day and enjoyed the 4th of July celebrations with his family, and he's messing in action on us. But man, we had a great day. It was a great celebration. Just got back from a spectacular fireworks display here in Frisco, Texas, and man, it's everybody's doing good out there, Tyler.
Yeah, and if you need any signs that David's doing good, the beads are on. He did not have to show anything to get the beads. They just give them to David Starr when you're David that way. But nonetheless, Dave, let me just ask you real quick. 4th of July weekend. Great time in the summer. To reflect and celebrate America, be with family and everything. I'm sure people at home just curious. What's the 4th mean to you?
Well, it's just, man, just to be an American and live in a great country and all the freedoms we have, and obviously, I'm a proud Texan where I'm from, but I'm a proud American. I just again, just to be able to do and have and enjoy the freedoms we have. Tyler, we have some cool jobs and we got cool lives, and I was just talking to a friend of my sister's. He was just got back from a missionary trip, and he was talking about, what you see in other countries and where he went. And man, it just puts it all in perspective. But dude, it's a great day. It's a great day to celebrate our country. And man, we had a good day. And all the fireworks and the celebration that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 days has been wonderful. And yourself, man, you just got back from Chicago, and but man, it just means everything to us to have the freedoms we have and to be a proud American. What about yourself, buddy?
Yeah. I mean, I've been telling people, it's more than just for me, David, of being an American, but being proud of what makes America. And we've been hearing a lot about beer companies these days, but not so much about beer itself, and I was telling people on air today, I'm like, hey, if you're going to have a beer or whatever it may be, buy American, spend that money, keep it here, and support businesses that are supporting this country, and I know some people are going to think, are you taking shots at Toyota? Not at all. Toyota spends a lot of money in America.
Absolutely.
They feel like an American company.
Absolutely.
But, in this day and age, just whatever we can do to support each other in this country, I think just little stuff like that goes a long way. But nonetheless, not an American in victory lane this weekend. How about that for a transition? Shane Van Gisbergen, the winner. I think I said his name right. SVG. We'll call him SVG for short. Gets it done at the Chicago Street Course. An upset win. David, I said this at the time. I'm curious what you think. It's the biggest upset, I think, in the modern era of NASCAR. Most people did not know who he was going into this weekend. First career start, first time in over 50 years that somebody wins a NASCAR Cup race in their first career starts. And to do it in the fashion he did, the Chicago Street Course and all, the Project 91 deal that Trackhouse does. I mean, what an amazing drive by SVG. And then to do it in clutch fashion too. I mean, he passed the big guys, Chase Elliott, Justin Haley, who led for much of the day and drove his way up front, got the job done. I was so impressed. I was not only in Project 91 and Darren Grubb, but SVG. I mean, that guy's incredible, and we'll talk more about his future later. But what a moment that was for the sport for him to pull that off.
I didn't even know who SVG Shane. I had no idea who he was, and it wasn't until when the race started, there was a little bit of a rain delay, and they talked about SVG Shane. He had qualified third. I think he was third quickest in practice, and and you started hearing about him under the rain delay. You know how impressed everybody was, but
Yeah,
once you start,
qualified well.
yeah, practice well, qualified well, uh, for his cup, for even for your first cup race practice qualifying, and again, it's been over 50 years, and I don't know exactly. I think it was 1963. Johnny Rutherford from Fort Worth, Texas, here was the last guy
Won a
to
Daytona qualifying points race.
absolutely 1963. And man, it was cool to know that because Johnny Rutherford's my buddy. He's from Texas here, and Lone Star, Lone Star Johnny Rutherford. So that was kind of cool. But man, so impressed. And then as the race played out, it was, man, you were impressed with this guy. Just throughout the whole race, whether he was on equal tires or however it was, even when he lost 2 or 3 spots, it didn't razzle him, man. He just raced hard, and I was impressed the whole day with him. It was kind of interesting throughout the broadcast, and a lot of you probably heard this, but the way he drove the race car with using a lot of magic in his footing, gas pedal, brake, using the clutch. And they talked about that. They were really impressed. The commentators, Dale Jarrett, Dale Earnhardt Jr., all of them were commenting on him using the clutch. He said, well, hey, that's one thing new about we don't do in America. In NASCAR, we shift with the throttle. And then as the race played on and as everything happened, they begin to really like, hey, we really need to learn and get educated, because whatever he was doing, the car wasn't wheel hopping and driving the car using the clutch. He really had a big advantage on everybody. And man, what an amazing race. But right there at the end of the race, I think when Shane SVG, I can't, when him and the 91 team Trackhouse, they had pitted earlier.
Yeah.
So they had, like, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, they had 1916 newer tires on the race car, compared to Chase Elliott and Justin Haley. So you see how quickly he caught Chase Elliott. And man, I was like, man, there's no way they can hold this guy out. There were too many laps left. But man, what an impressive the whole thing. SVG coming to America, driving for Trackhouse in the 91 project. Is that what they call it?
Project 91, yeah.
Project 91. His first race. NASCAR and the city of Chicago putting on an event that I think was just over the top. All the new fans I saw on television, I can't think of anything that was a negative about the whole. You were there,
right?
But from what we saw on television, man, it was a home run every which angle you can look at it.
Yeah, we got plenty to talk about as far as the elements of this race goes. Let's look at the event itself. I know a lot was made about the Xfinity race of not reaching halfway, and they called it for Cole Custer. And, the concerts were a big element of this. Remember, it was labeled as Chicago Street Race / Music Festival. That was a big part of the ticket that was sold. You only had one concert of the 4 due to weather. But as Denny Hamlin, I think, did a good job pointing out, only God controls the weather here. There was only so much NASCAR could do. And you're talking about city streets involved here to try to finish that Xfinity race Monday may not made a whole lot of people happy. And with the circumstances, like, I know that it's not ideal to call a race winner when you technically didn't reach halfway. You were 2 laps short. But I think NASCAR, I don't know about you, David, between, starting the race, the Cup race, and finishing it short, 75 laps, shortening the Xfinity race, canceling the concerts, all whatever, they made the most the hand that they were dealt. I mean, it's unfortunate. It sucks for some people that Maybe we're buying tickets to hope to see some of those concerts or see Xfinity race, whatever. But I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of just is what it is. I thought NASCAR made the most of the opportunity.
Man, circumstances, I think, Denny Hamlin, there's only one person that controls everything, and that's God. And, I think the city of Chicago and NASCAR did a phenomenal job. I'm glad, I'm glad that you or myself aren't the ones making those decisions, but I think NASCAR and the city of Chicago did everything they could to try to get that Xfinity race completed. And like you said, when the tickets were sold for the Xfinity race, there were concerts involved, which were canceled.
Right.
They ran 25 laps. Is that right? Was it 28 laps?
They ran 25 out of 55.
25 out of 55. And I think NASCAR did everything they could possibly do. They asked the teams, they didn't declare a winner Saturday afternoon when everything got rained out. They ran 25 laps. The weather came in, couldn't rain no more. There's so much water, you just couldn't compete in those conditions. And they said, "Hey, we'll cover the cars up. We'll try this again tomorrow morning." Well, you wake up Sunday morning in Chicago, and man, it's still the conditions. The weather was bad. It was raining. Right. There was water everywhere. You were there.
Right.
I saw the pictures, and I'm like, man, there's no way.
Well, and like Jeremy Clements, for example, came out and he was not happy that they had to come back and didn't run the race because it cost his team $1,500 in hotel rooms. And I understand his frustration, but I mean, NASCAR tried,
It cost a lot of teams, and not only Jeremy Clemens' teams, all the teams had to stay overnight, you know what I mean? And NASCAR would have never asked them to do that if they were doing the best they can under the circumstances. They
weren't trying to screw over
nobody. They were just trying to complete a race. And when you were only, I think what were you short? You short 2.5 laps, 2 laps, 3 laps, 2 laps. It was just no way they was going to be able to get the race in Sunday morning with the weather being what it was. I mean, I saw pictures. People were tweeting out and Facebook, tires were floating on pit road. Right. I mean, it was a mess. And again, Tyler, you mentioned it. The city of Chicago, the traffic, moving people around, to wait until Monday morning to finish 2 laps. Just the circumstances of everything. I think NASCAR and the city of Chicago, I think they made the right decision, man, even though didn't get to halfway point, but they did all they could. And man, it's understandable. And I know there's going to be some teams that are really frustrated because maybe they lost out those 2 laps or 3 laps or trying to finish the race. Obviously the race would have looked different than the way it finished, with different positions.
It would have been tough to beat Cole Custer. He looked really good.
Absolutely. But man, I just think under the circumstances of the weather and racing in a city where we never raced before, I think NASCAR, I think they did the best they could do, and they didn't have no choice but to call the race 2 laps short of halfway. And it was the best they had under the circumstances of everything. So not everybody's going to agree with that, but I think that was the best, that out of knowing everything, that was the best you had right there.
I know that people were, and yourself included, skeptical of the street race format. But, for them to literally 30 minutes after that rain stopped on Sunday to get the cars on track, the rain tires, getting the lights on the cars and all that, and for it to go pretty smoothly, relatively speaking, I was impressed how far we've come. David, about 3 years ago, we would have never even thought about the idea of rain tires and let alone a street course and all this. If we would have gone racing 5 minutes earlier, it would have been a disaster. To make the most of the opportunity to get 75 laps in, get the cars and get the track as good as it was to race was a phenomenal job. Says how far we've come technology-wise, not just NASCAR, but Goodyear too.
Man, all of it, the Air Titan, the new vehicles that drive the racetrack. it was amazing to me how quick they were to get the drivers in the car, get get the cars on the racetrack, and to drop the green flag. It was very interesting, and the technology, the new racing, the rain racing tires were amazing. It made for some exciting racing. I mean, because we all saw it. I saw it. You saw it. The fans saw it. I mean, you see Kyle Busch over driving a corner and, man, locking up the brakes and sliding the tire barriers, and they pull him out, and, man, the guy comes back and finishes fourth. It was amazing how the race all played out.
Tire barriers did their job.
Man, the tire barriers were amazing. I mean, there's so many people went into the tire barriers at a high rate of speed, and it really didn't take the car out of competition. It might have brought out a caution.
Right.
They had to pull the car out of the tire barrier, but they was able to finish the race. I was really impressed with that. But, man, what a phenomenal event. Again, we talked about the Xfinity race being shortened 2 laps to get to halfway point, but look what happened. I mean, with all the rain that was in the downtown Chicago Sunday morning, the race being delayed, starting time and everything. I mean, just look at the Cup race. What they had to cut it, 20 laps short? How many laps?
25, yeah.
25 laps short because they were losing daylight. And, I think the city of Chicago and NASCAR together, a collaborative effort on the sanctioning body, NASCAR, and the city officials, they did the best they could, and man, it was phenomenal. It was a hell of a race.
Yeah.
It was so impressive, all aspects of it. I was impressed with the fans, and the fans, I mean, when the race started, and it was before the race started, before they asked the drivers to go to their cars. I mean, there was no fans anywhere.
No.
But once that race started, oh my God, where'd all the people come from? It was amazing.
And they were still showing up at the end of stage one.
Dude, it was amazing. People were coming from everywhere. It was just a cool event. And I think everybody that NASCAR, the city of Chicago, everybody that has a piece on putting a race together, the crews, the safety crews, everybody involved, everybody did a phenomenal job. I know as part of the sport, I'm proud of what NASCAR did, and I think it was such a home run. And you even told me that the TV ratings were over the top.
Yeah, over 5 million people watched. It was the most watched NASCAR race on NBC since 2017. And it was the second most watched NASCAR race of the year, only to the Daytona 500.
Think about that. That's unbelievable, man.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is insane.
I had people I work with that don't watch NASCAR that said, I had to see that. I wanted to see what that was all about, of street racing, the rain involved. I think the rain may actually even help the ratings, to be honest. People were wondering, how is this all going to work out? It was an incredible product. And, I know that going into this weekend, David, there was questions about the future of this race in Chicago with the new mayor and the opt-out that the city of Chicago has. And we know NASCAR invested $50 million to put this race on. And going forward, if they're going to bring this race back, it's not going to cost that much, maybe about half to do this race. But we talked about with Dustin Long when he was with us of NBC Sports a couple weeks ago. This was not even just so much about Chicago. It was about coming up with a concept and a template to be able to take to other places potentially. And whether that's a second street race or moving this street race to a place like Philly or the Meadowlands, whatever it may be. I know that things didn't work out maybe weather-wise with the concerts or the finishing the Xfinity race and all that. But the number one thing I think NASCAR accomplished was they found a concept that worked. And now, whether it's Chicago or somewhere else, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a street race or two on our calendar every single year. And NASCAR, I think, figured out a formula that they should be able to pick up and take on the road, whether it be back in Chicago or somewhere else in the future. The ratings show people want to see this.
Man, no doubt about it. I was impressed. I listened to the drivers, what they were saying about the racetrack itself, the street courses, and asphalt and concrete.
Developed by iRacing too.
Yeah, and man, I heard a lot of great feedback, and I believe, my opinion is, I think they should go back to Chicago again in 2024, and hopefully the event will be without rain,
right?
And with all the concerts and everything going on, I think I'd like to see them do it again, just because the event, even though it was over the top, didn't have a fair chance with the weather.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'd love to see it have a great weekend with an Xfinity race, the Cup race.
Bring sports cars next year.
Absolutely. Add another series, but with great weather. And I think we're going to see record crowds. I think the racing is going to be phenomenal. And I think I think street racing for NASCAR, again, I was skeptical of it, but after seeing the race Sunday, I think it's here to stay. One street course a season, and in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if we seen two.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And but I would like to see Chicago have another shot at, and NASCAR, collaborative effort to put on another street race there, because you heard the drivers, y'all heard the drivers. There's a lot of great feedback on how grippy and how racy the racetrack was. The racing was great. So I'd like to see them try to get in there at Chicago, because I think it'll be a home run.
Yeah, it was totally different than anything I've seen before. I mean, you didn't see motorhomes around. Drivers didn't even stay in their own motorhomes. They stayed in hotels.
Yeah.
And 75% of the fans, it was their first ever NASCAR race.
It's perfect, man. Just think how many new fans at that event. Now I would hope that a lot of those fans that we saw on television, you saw them live in person, they were everywhere. Hopefully our sport just gained a whole lot of new fans. I hope so. And I can't imagine that we didn't.
And we're going to be back in that market, relatively speaking, Michigan in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis is an annual race in the calendar now. I mean, those fans in the area have a chance to come see other races besides Chicago too, and see what we do each and every week, and would love that they be a part of the sport that we know and love each and every week. As far as race goes, we mentioned SVG with the win. And one topic conversation that came out of this race was, did he make the NASCAR drivers look bad? We heard Chase Elliott actually say he's probably going to go home to his friends, his buddies back home, and say, wow, I'm a lot better than those guys. That was easy what I pulled off. Now, I think Chase is being funny, being a little facetious, whatever. But nonetheless, I think Denny had a good description about it. He said, look, SVG ran a supercar, which was actually based on the current Cup car. The X-Gen car is actually based on a supercar. Mm-hmm. And he had street course experience. He said that SVG had more of an advantage with his past experience to this street course setup than any of the Cup drivers did. It was a unique circumstance. I think that we talk about it all the time. These are the best drivers in the world in NASCAR. They were very competitive. SVG had to work for everything. He didn't run away from the field there. I don't think the NASCAR drivers look bad at all. It took, what do we say, 50 years for somebody to win their first career start? I don't hold anything back. I don't think it's any indictment at all in Cup competition. What say you?
So Shane, SVG, man, guy is incredibly talented. So we have our first street course ever.
It wasn't on an oval.
No, it wasn't on an oval, or even Watkins Glen or Road America, right, or Mid Ohio. A lot of these great road racing racetracks in America. It wasn't there. It was a brand new street course that nobody has ever raced on. And you look at SVG, Shane, you look at where he came from, the types of cars that super, what do you call that? Super 8
supercar, V8 supercars.
V8. It's incredible, man. I love watching that series when I get a chance to see it, because a lot of those cars look like our NASCAR race cars. They're heavy, they roll over a lot, They race them on road courses, street courses, and I think the new next gen race car is similar to
Yeah.
a V8 supercar, and us NASCAR race car drivers here in America never raced on a street course before. Man, it was a perfect storm for SVG to come in here and dominate like he did. I don't know if he didn't dominate, but to be so impressive, this guy's a three-time champion,
Right.
over 80 Super V8 car wins. I mean, so I think from that perspective, he had an advantage. You know what I mean? He was familiar with that type of racing in the wet and the dry. I mean, but here's, I think if we'd have been at Watkins Glen and was just a dry racetrack, Watkins Glen with the guys, a lot of the best NASCAR drivers in the world at Racing Cup today, I don't really think the results would have been the same. You know what I
Right.
mean? But you're talking about a racetrack that nobody's ever raced on before. It equaled up the playing field, and really, I think SVG had an advantage because he was more used to the street courses with those types of cars.
It would be like if, you know, Dale Earnhardt, he's their Dale Earnhardt essentially, went to IndyCar for their first ever super speedway race. I mean, Dale Sr. would have been, all right, fine. I got it.
No, absolutely. No doubt about it. But man, let me tell you what, our NASCAR guys, our cup superstars of our sport, these guys are good.
Right.
They're good. You don't really ever, I can't remember, and you'll have to help me. And Dominic would tell us, but years ago, I don't know if it was 10, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, the cup teams would bring in a road racing ace.
Right.
Ron Fellows, Boris Said, a road racing ace, and put them in a car, and they would go out and win a race. But over the years, our cup drivers, they're so talented.
They got better.
Dude, on short tracks, on super speedways, on road courses. I mean, they're phenomenal. You know what I mean? I just think the street course, the wet, the new next gen race car, it played into the favor of SVG. You know what I mean? And but man, I don't think any of our guys have anything to be ashamed of. They're the best race car drivers in the world.
Right.
And and I think it's kind of cool to have a guy from New Zealand coming to America and getting his first NASCAR Cup race in a street course, win the race. Good for him. I think it definitely did, with the first street course in Chicago, and that's talking about the TV ratings and me seeing all these fans. It's like, it was amazing. And like you said 70% of them, I think you said 75% of them were new fans, never been to a NASCAR race. They're loving it. How about all the people in New Zealand and across the pond that probably tuned into that race who are now NASCAR fans, man? You know what I mean? So I think everything's good about it.
A guy that I know from Australia, he messaged me and I asked him about it. He said it was a big deal there. This is the best result by somebody from down under ever. This is the biggest thing they've ever accomplished. That was how excited they were in that part of the world.
But it just goes to show you how popular in the world that America's largest motorsports racing in America, NASCAR Cup racing. It goes to show you how popular it is. I can assure you,
this race was on at like 1:00 in the afternoon Australian time. Everybody was watching.
The Super V8 supercars, which Shane has come from, I'm sure all those guys over there racing that series are biting at are just wanting the opportunity to come to America and drive a cup car. You know what I mean?
Right.
And even more now. But anyway, I'm proud of our cup guys. I don't think any of them have anything to be ashamed of. And man, the technique, we were talking about Shane winning the race, but they said, man, we talked about it earlier, his footwork, his gas pedal, brake, clutching, on these next gen race cars and these transmissions we have, you don't have to use a clutch.
Right.
But man, he used the clutch so much. I think there was something to it which was not allowing the car to, if you overdrove a corner and you downshift, I mean, that thing wheel hops. The next thing you know,
And he killed the motor before overtime.
dude, it was, I mean, unbelievable. You know what I mean? But anyway, that type of racing just fit him perfect. And man, he showed everybody up.
Last thing before we move on. One controversy of sorts of NASCAR's end is when they announced that the race would not go the full distance of 100 laps, would go down to 75 due to the sunlight. And you already had some teams come in for their final pit stop, others not. And so obviously that affected the pit cycle of some sorts and helped out guys like SVG on that front. Kyle Busch said after the race that it didn't affect him because his team was aware that the race wasn't going to go the full distance because they could tell that with the sunlight situation. You had guys like Denny Hamlin say that they should have either announced it earlier or waited till towards the end of the race and said, hey, we got 10 laps to go. We're ending it from here. I mean, the way I look at it, David, I'm curious what you think. I mean, everybody knew ahead of time they didn't have the lighting for that place to go the race at night. I mean, if you got a good crew chief, good engineers, I mean, you should have been able to figure out that race wasn't going to go to the distance anyway, right?
There's a lot of intelligent, brilliant people that work on these NASCAR Cup teams, the crew chiefs, the engineering staff. I mean, there's a lot of smart people that make these race cars fast and build speed in them. And they're paying attention to weather, all kinds of different things, man, you got to know yourself. I know they knew when the race started, and with all the cautions that were going on, I believe they all knew that there was no way that race was going to be able to run the distance.
Right.
I even was thinking in my head, it's like, man, there's no way they're going to get this race completed before it gets dark, So I said, man, NASCAR is going to shorten this race. I even thought that watching it, what I mean? So that they all knew that. I think they all do it, really. It's just the way it all plays out, So, some engineers and crew chiefs, they have a strategy. Some of them might have deferred, might have changed that strategy. Some of them might have didn't, and we know that some of them didn't do it. They stayed on that strategy, like the race was going to run the distance, and it backfired on them some. You know what I mean? And then there was others that probably had an ideal and changed the strategy up, and it worked out. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, you can say there's a little bit of controversy about it, but man, I don't know. The race, everybody ran the same amount of laps, and and somebody had to finish first, and hey, we got us a winner. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I don't think everybody knew what time the race was starting. Everybody knew how long it was going to take. It was going to be dark. I don't know. I think I think it was an equal playing field for all, and the winner won, and everybody else. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, you can turn it into a controversy, but I don't believe so.
I mean, you could look and see when it's going to get dark and just do the simple math. We're not getting there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I was surprised. I mean, there was Martin Truex Jr., Tyler Reddick, golly, Denny Hamlin. There was a lot of fast cars that when the race played out later during the race, those cars that were dominant for a long time, strategy or whatever happened to them, I would have never thought the race would have played out like it played out. It's not what I imagined, but the race ran its course, and SVG won the race fair and square. I don't know how else how to put it. You know what I mean? So yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
News and notes time. The latest happenings around the NASCAR world. Let's start with SVG in our news and notes this week. After the race, he was asked if he wants to come race in NASCAR full time, and he said, "Hey, I got one more year left in V8 supercars, one more year under contract, and then I'd love to come in 2025." Well, his team owner at Triple Eight Racing has said he will not stand in the way of a permanent move to NASCAR. If Shane Van Gisbergen wants to go to NASCAR next year, he'll void the contract and he'll let him go. So, with that, David, if SVG wants to come to NASCAR, obviously Trackhouse, I imagine, is going to be would love to have him. There's another teams out there as a winner already in your first starts. If he wants to come race full time in Cup racing, I'm sure somebody's going to have a spot for him.
Well, I would hope so. He's a proven winner. You can plug him into your racing team.
And he's got a dirt background too.
Man, I mean, so the guy is very talented. So I'm sure there's going to be opportunities for him. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out. He Trackhouse was Project 91. He didn't have to bring any sponsorship, I don't believe. They just put him in the car.
The sponsor came to them, actually, is what Justin Marks said, Enhance Health, before they even named a driver.
Okay. So, there's lots of business stuff, sponsor stuff. But man, I think if SVG wants to come to NASCAR, I think he'll find a home real quick.
I think he would.
That's my opinion.
And it wasn't a fluky win. I think he could win next year again.
No, he had, he passed Chase Elliott. He passed
Justin
Haley. Passed him fair and square. He did have newer tires on, but man, he won the race. He nobody gave him anything,
right?
And man, he pulled away. It was impressive, and even with the restart at the end, I mean, you handle like a true, like a champion. They were talking about, hey, get a good restart. Those guys behind you are hungry, and get too close with, they're gonna put the bumper to you. And dude, he didn't give him a chance. You know what I mean? So It was impressive. His victory and the way he handled himself under pressure. He'll definitely have a home in NASCAR if he wants.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Cole Custer, he is going to do 3 races for Rick Ware Racing beginning this weekend in Atlanta in the number 51 Jacob Company's Ford Mustang. Custer has made it no secret he wants to get back to the Cup Series. 2 wins in the Xfinity side, including this past weekend, the Chicago Street Course. He's been running better after a slow start in the Xfinity Series this year. We know that 10 car has a decent chance of being open at the end of the season, with speculation about Eric Almirola's future. And Rick Ware Racing obviously has questions about who's going to drive their cars next year. Big opportunity for Cole Custer here back in a Cup car.
Man, he's very talented. Coming back into the Xfinity Series, winning 2 races, strong every week. Ford loves him. Stewart-Haas Racing, his dad, Joe Custer, is the president. I believe we'll see him back in Cup racing full time in 2024. I think for Rick Ware Racing, which is a Ford team, to put Cole Custer in a car for the next 3 races is a great opportunity for both parties. And Rick Ware Racing has really stepped up their program. I think their Ford program, I believe that they share.
Jenson Button was great this past week.
Absolutely. It was very competitive. JJ Yaley's been really competitive in the Rick Ware cars, but they have an alliance with Kozlowski, Roush,
RFK,
Racing, and man, it's impressive. I think it's a great opportunity for Cole Custer to get back in the Cup side for the next 3 races with Ford. But I think we'll see Cole Custer back in full-time Cup racing for next year.
Well, and even I know that the favorites for the 10 car, it seems right now, according to reports from Michael McDowell and Zane Smith, but with Cole Custer, with his relationship with Stewart-Haas, with his dad there, maybe there's some type of compromise next year where what if they could be the de facto fifth team for Stewart Haas of some sorts? If they could come up with a partnership to put the horsepower behind a Rick Ware team, which could help Rick Ware go a long way.
Oh, no doubt that anything's possible. I think Rick Ware is sitting in a good situation right now, because he is aligned with, Kozlowski, Rouse, or I can't remember the acronyms, but man, he's aligned well, and it could benefit Rick Ware Racing next year, like you're saying, Tyler. But I do believe that we'll see Cole Custer back and on the Cup side full time next year. What car is it back with Stewart Haas? Is it Rick Ware? I don't know, but I think we'll see him in the Cup side.
And then lastly, on the news and notes front, this weekend, Atlanta, the Quaker State 400 presented by Walmart, coming up Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time on USA. David, Atlanta's been exciting the last couple of years ever since the reconfiguration. And, obviously this is the home race for Chase Elliott. He raced very good last week. Doesn't have a pathway through points to get to the playoff. I think kind of every race from here on out we're on Chase Elliott watch. Is this the week that Chase Elliott gets back to victory lane? I think that's kind of the headline, it seems, from every race going forward to the playoff, if this is going to be the week he breaks through.
Well, it's he loves Atlanta Motor Speedway. Obviously, he won last year, and he needs a win to be in the playoffs. But man, Tyler, I can assure you that the Atlanta Motor Speedway now it's a super speedway. It races like Daytona, it races like Talladega. Anything's possible. Chase needs to win. I think the intensity with Hendrick Motorsports and Chase Elliott, their whole crew, is they need to win. They need to win. So not only was he trying to win this past weekend in Chicago, finishing third, but he's going to come to Atlanta with the same intensity. They need a win. There's no ifs and buts about it. They got to win, or he's not going to be in the playoffs this year. And so it wouldn't surprise me. But man, I tell you, it's going to be a tough race. It's going to be exciting for the fans, the drivers. The races at Daytona, Talladega, we love them. And now the races at Atlanta Motor Speedway are just so exciting. Everybody's on top of each other. It's incredible, So can Chase Elliott win the race there in Atlanta? Absolutely, he can. But man, it's going to be a fun, exciting race to see who gets the checker flag first. That's for sure.
For me, David, I think the guy that's been the most consistent all year, he's raced really well at Atlanta, Chase Elliott's teammate, William Byron. I think that 24 car, it doesn't matter whether it's been short tracks, mile and a half, super speedways, whatever. William Byron has been good all year long, not just winning races, but running up front too. He's the guy I'm watching for. Who's the guy you're watching for?
Man, he's impressive. We would have never thought that the Hendrick organization, that William Byron was going to be the leader of all those teams this year, but he's been impressive. But man, Kyle Larson really had a good run in Chicago. He's been coming on pretty good here lately. But man, I think those Hendrick cars are going to be working together. And I think, if it's not Chase Elliott, I think you'll see a Hendrick car in victory lane here in Atlanta this weekend.
Yeah. I said this last week. I'll stick to my guns. I'm going to pick Chase Elliott every week until he finally gets into victory lane. Man, this Tyler, week could be the week.
Don't be like me, man. You can't pick the same driver every week. You know what I mean? Hell, that gets kind of boring for our fans.
So you're not going Kevin Harvick this week?
Well, I mean, I want Kevin to win. He's been so strong. He's just had a lot of bad luck. I'd like to see Kevin win a race or two before his last race there at Phoenix. So, I'm gonna say Kevin Harvick again. But man, there's so many guys that have a lot of speed and are fast. It's going to be an exciting race, that's for sure. But I'm going to go with Kevin Harvick.
Okay. And we'll get to our mailbag segment next, where you can submit questions to us via Facebook, Twitter, at Starr Podcast, also by email, davidstarrpodcast@gmail.com. And our first question in the inbox this week comes from Ian. Ian wants to know, David, we're hearing speculation that the playoff in 2024 is going to look dramatically different. What changes track-wise would you like to see to the playoff?
Well, That's a great question, Ian. I never even really thought about that, but I don't know. I asked the question to Tyler in those final 10 races in the playoffs, right? Is there a road course?
You have the Roval
The
at
roll.
Charlotte,
Yeah, there's a road course. You have a super speedway.
Talladega.
You have short tracks. So, for me, I think, the schedule now and the schedule last year, I'm okay with it. I don't, what could they add, Tyler, to those last 10 races to make it even more exciting than it has been the last couple of years? I just think it's been over the top. You know what I mean? I can't think of a track that they need to add to those last 10 races to really bring another element to something that's already over the top exciting. You know what I
So,
mean?
so one thing that comes to mind for me, we've heard rumblings. It sounds like Montreal is going to get added to the schedule next year, replacing California.
Right.
And I can't imagine that it replaces the date of California. I highly doubt we're going to Montreal, Canada in early March when there's still
Absolutely.
snow on the
Yeah,
ground.
absolutely.
Maybe you kick off the playoff from Canada, and that actually should be nice that time of year, end of August, early September. To me, you want to start the playoff with a bang. Let's go to Canada and get things started.
Man, anything's possible. You know what I mean? And man, the way NASCAR's just done a tremendous job. They've really been stepping way outside that box and changing the schedule, trying this, trying that. And I tell you, man, it's all been working. Everything they've been doing for me, it's really been a big enhancement to the sport. So if there's a big change coming in 2024 to the last 10 laps, the last 10 tracks of the championship,
Right,
I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be good it's going to make it even more exciting, which I didn't think was possible.
right,
But all the changes and everything they've been doing here last couple of years, it's been a big positive.
right.
So I'll be excited and excited to hear what that may be. You might have an inside because you're on the media side, but I don't have a clue.
Well, yeah, and from what we've heard is that they're saying like, hey, we already have these tracks, but we'd like to mix up what are the playoff tracks that come into mind. Maybe you throw in a Michigan to the playoff. Maybe you throw in a Pocono to the playoff, or just mix up a little bit, just changing up what those are. I mean, we saw this year Miami's back in the playoff mix after being out for the last couple of years, and just kind of keeping it fresh of some sorts. To me, I think that would go a long way. My one request, if NASCAR is listening, is let's just be cautious of what the weather is like certain places at the time of year. you know, Kansas Speedway is my home track. I love Kansas Speedway. I do. But we had no business going there in mid October when it was 40 degrees a couple different years.
Right.
Like, let's keep that in mind. If the weather's fine, then I'm okay.
Well, I can tell you this, Tyler. I'm glad I'm not the guy that's making those decisions. You know what I mean? I'm sure they got all the right people and they're very intelligent. And, there's a lot of elements that go into, to picking the schedule, picking the racetracks for the chase races. You know what I mean? I'm just glad I'm not one of those guys. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to appease everybody. You're not going to have 100% of the people supporting whatever it may be. But I think NASCAR has done a tremendous job the last 3-4 years, and I think you'll continue to see excitement. If there is a change coming, it'll be for the better of the fans. And I don't know how you I don't know how you make it any more exciting than it is. It's pretty damn exciting already.
I think so. David, we got to go, but before we do, you're back on the racetrack this week at Atlanta. Tell us about what's in store for you this week.
Well, man, I'm excited to get back to the racetrack, be driving the 35 car for Joey Gase again, and man, it's gonna be exciting, man. Anytime you get back in the race car and race, man, I mean, I live and eat and sleep it, and he eats at me when I'm not racing. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to getting to Atlanta and racing there. It's always exciting and can't wait.
I got to tell you, I know we've had Joey on the show before and everything, but I got to say, I was around his operation when you raced for him for the first time a couple weeks ago in Nashville, and I love just the family aspect his things got going. You see his wife and his kids are around,
His
and
dad.
who was it? The old guy that kept everybody in line. That was just running the operation, was very friendly, very kind. I mean, they got a neat program there that feels like the neighborhood coming together running a race team or something.
Yeah, Patrick, his partner, and Joey Gase have done a phenomenal job. Joey's always been a competitor and a friend of mine, but to drive for Joey Gase was kind of interesting how it all came to be. But hey, man, they've done a phenomenal job building their race program and the business side of it.
And he's balancing being a driver and an owner.
Yeah, that's tough, dude. That's not an easy to be a driver and owner is a challenge. There's not a lot of driver owners that have made that successful for a long period of time. So I'm pulling for Joey and Patrick. They've done a good job so far, and man, it's been fun. It's been fun to do something different with somebody I never driven before. They're very passionate, trying to give us what we need, to be able to race better for them. But they're doing a good job, and I'm looking forward to getting to Atlanta and racing again.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we'll see as we go to the second half of the season, more races for you in the very near future. Pretty exciting on that front. So definitely looking forward to that. I'll be enjoying the weekend back here in Dallas. I was on the road in Nashville and Chicago, and now time to just take it easy this weekend, put it back in first gear, and enjoy watching you this weekend from afar. But nonetheless, it should be a lot of fun, David. As always, subscribe to the show each and every week. New episodes out on Wednesdays on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review or don't leave us one at all. Hit us up on social media at Starr Podcast on Twitter and Facebook, and by email, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. This show, part of the Studio Soapbox Network. Check out this as well as the Jones Report, Coach Bo Knows Podcast, and more wherever you listen to podcasts. We certainly would appreciate it. He's David Starr. I'm Tyler Jones. Dominic Aragon will be back with us next week, as well as our entire crew. We thank you for joining us. Hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. And we'll see you right back here next week as we'll look back at the weekend that was from Atlanta. We'll put the check flag out in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and appreciate you being here on Let's Go Racing.